Hey folks, hope you're well. Just want to give you a gaze at this. Just a glorious Scribbly Gum patch. Now this is in an area, and I don't mean to brag about this, but it's an area that most people will never get to really see because it's in a water catchment sort of restricted area. This is the Upper Nepean State Conservation Area, and it's all water catchment near the Avon Dam and the headwaters of the Nepean River. This is located between sort of Mittagong and sort of Robertson, East Kangaloon in the Southern Highlands. I've been lucky enough to come in here a couple of times. And again, we're just doing some vegetation mapping, updating, validation, all that sort of thing. But we're just on this beautiful sort of expanse of Scribbly Gum here. There's a couple of other eucalypts. There's Eucalyptus globioida. And further afield, there's things like Seabury and some Piperita as well. There's also, we're right on the southern limit for Parramatta red gum. And I should make a video about that, but maybe I'll make one some other time. But if you get into these Scribbly Gum woodlands, they're absolutely beautiful. So I thought, what better place to make a video? But you've got to try and figure out what Scribbly Gum you've got. And that can be a bit of a dog's breakfast these days, as most people will know, if you're into these Scribbly Gums and into eucalypts in general. I've got this in a sort of one of the eucalyptus sort of lectures online, but never made a video on these guys. They're beautiful eucalypts. Here they're about, they're not really pushing 20 metres. They're sort of pushing 16 to 18, maybe 14 to 16. But when you got a Scribbly Gum woodland, they're just so dramatic. So in a nutshell, really quickly, historically we've had 5 Scribbly Gum species. And the interesting thing is these Scribbly Gums, they're sort of confined, I would say, generally to the Greater Sydney area. A lot of them sort of have most of their occurrence, what I'd call in the Greater Sydney area. Now, they do expand into the other side of the Blue Mountains, and they do go down into a little bit of the southern tablelands. And I know they go up the north coast a little bit. But if you look at where most of them occur, it's, a lot of their occurrence is in sort of the Greater Sydney area. So it's sort of like the Scribbly Gums are a bit of a Greater Sydney thing. I mean, we're only an hour and a half shy from Sydney here. But we had 5 species or 5 taxa, and it just helps me to remember 1 H, 2 R's and 2 S's. We had Hemistoma, Rossii, racemosa, sclerophylla and signata. And then a PhD study decided that sclerophylla and signata, the 2 S's, didn't really exist. They were just sort of intermediate between Eucalyptus hemistoma, which was kept, and Eucalyptus racemosa, subspecies racemosa, and Eucalyptus racemosa, subspecies Rossii. That's what the PhD study concluded. So 5 species went into 3, well, what you might call 2 species, with one of those species having 2 subspecies. So we could say 5 taxa went into 3 taxa. And look, I'm pretty confident that this guy here would have been called Eucalyptus sclerophylla. It would have been called the hardleaf Scribbly Gum. And I still tend to call it that. I still tend to call it sclerophylla, even though I think if you look at Euclid online, they don't agree with it, or they don't believe in it, I like to say. They don't believe in that taxon anymore. They will call it racemosa, subspecies racemosa. So I was trying to get hold of some foliage. Look, I think there's a sapling over here. If you get hold of the juvenile leaves of what we might call sclerophylla / racemosa, they're nice and genuine. They're nice and chunky. They got this nice bluey green feel. You could argue to me these have sort of got oblique bases as well, but this is clearly not a stringy bark. This is a gum. And when I see their juvenile leaves, you know, that's not unusual. They're just nice and big, chunky. I always think they've got a nice smell. They've got a nice hit to them. It's not quite a peppermint smell, but it's getting towards that, but it's a nice fresh hit. Anyway, they're very bluey green. You can see that bluey green hue in the sunlight, so they got a nice strong dash of blue in them. Really good. I'm having another smell. Yeah, nice strong hit there. And as you know, with the Scribbly Gums, they have always got the sort of definite scribbles on the trunk. There's a nice one there. Sometimes they get really truly covered. And that's caused by a moth larvae. So a moth lays its eggs on there and the larvae wiggles through just in these random patterns, sort of chewing through the cambium. Scribbly gums aren't the only gums that have scribbles. You can get them on blackbutt as well, Eucalyptus pileularis. There might be a couple of other trees as well, but people will either call them scribbly or I've met some people who call them squiggly gums. But either way, yeah, you can normally tell a scribbly gum from just look for the scribbles and you'll see them eventually. So they have this beautiful mottling on the trunk. Eventually some of the bark peels off, so it decorticates, and then you get this beautiful smooth pattern underneath. More scribbles there. A whole ton of scribbles here. So this is what they can really do when they turn it on. It's really interesting, the scribbly nature, but it's all meant to be random. And I'd like to find some buds, but I'm really battling here at the moment. But the best sort of ID feature is the fruits. And one of the main things for the distinction of the taxa, if we stick with Eucalyptus haemastoma, that's got the biggest fruit. That's got fruit to, I think, at least 7 millimeters wide or more. So 7 millimeters wide or more. One of the sort of lazy defaults is as soon as you get small fruit, then you got to be thinking the other taxa. You got to be thinking, well, what we'd call now racemosa, and whether it's racemosa sub-rossii or racemosa sub-racemosa, or what I still like to call sclerophylla. They have fruit on the small side. They've got fruit less than 7 mil, and then you might have a few changes after that. But I get a little bit vague on the leaf characteristics and that sort of thing. Eucalyptus signata is a north coast species that goes up the north coast to sort of Newcastle, north of Sydney. That's a sort of coastal eucalypt, so you sort of rule that out. Eucalyptus sclerophylla has had a history of being recorded in Western Sydney, in the Western Sydney EECs, and being recorded in sort of this part of the world as well, this Southern Highlands part of the world. So again, we've gone southwest of Sydney and we've sort of come into here. Eucalyptus racemosa, that's got a more coastal distribution historically, and that's been recorded in the Royal National Park and areas, you know, sort of close to the coast. Wollongong is a good place for it. Further up coastal Sydney, but you will get hemistoma all through that area as well. Racemosa traditionally tended to have narrow leaves. It had really narrow leaves when you look at it, and I see a lot in Sutherland Shire that are narrow. But this guy has, nice big sort of leaves to 4 centimetres wide. So sclerophylla historically has nice sort of genuine sort of fat leaves. And it was called the hardleaf Scribbly Gum. That's what it was called, the hardleaf Scribbly Gum. Probably because of those, I reckon, because of those genuine fat leaves. And sclerophylla sort of means leaves full of sclerenchyma and toughened tissue. So I really like that name sclerophylla, and I thought they were easily identifiable. But really, you identify this one now as... You've got every right to just call it racemosa subracemosa. That's what, if you don't want to call it sclerophylla, you can just call it racemosa and be done with it. But I sort of thought sclerophylla was sort of easily identifiable. Sometimes you will see some deviation in the canopy width. You'll see some trees which have really narrow leaves, and then you'll see some trees that have fat leaves. If you're on the other side of the Blue Mountains generally, although you might be in the southern tablelands, let's say around Goulburn, well, then you got to start thinking Eucalyptus rossii, or what's called Eucalyptus rossii. That's the inland Scribbly Gum. You got to start thinking about that one. And if you're in areas like Bathurst, you get onto the rocky hillsides and you get a Scribbly Gum, a nice tall Scribbly Gum. It can only be rossii. It can only really be Eucalyptus rossii. It was sort of split off based on its geographic isolation from the other 4 taxa. But I really like this for, what I'd call sclerophylla. And if you're dealing with plant community types, it's whether they're going to keep mentioning sclerophylla or not, or they're going to get rid of it. It looks like New South Wales Flora Online is no longer recognising sclerophylla. It looks like it's gone. I should have said that earlier. On New South Wales Flora Online, it's not there. Sclerophylla has sort of been abandoned, or no one believes in it anymore. And that's because of, I think, some recent genetic testing, I think. So it looks like, we're going to lose this beautiful, what we would have called sclerophylla on this Mittagong formation. A little bit in from the coast with these small fruits. Nice sort of fatter leaves with small fruits. That's basically what I go on. So these fruits are about, they're probably about 4 to 5 mil wide. And I constantly get my yardstick and I'm all measuring stick I've got, and I'm always measuring them as I pick them up off the ground. But when they're fresh, they got a nice red disc, and they're probably about 5 mil long as well. Hemistoma fruit get a lot bigger, but that's a typical Scribbly Gum appearance. You got to look for that red disc on the top, sort of thick and red disc. Hemistoma means blood mouth, but all the other Scribbly Gums have that red disc as well up the top. So that's what you sort of got to look for. But what I do with these Scribbly Gums as I keep working is I keep checking this fruit size. I just keep checking the fruit size. When it gets up to 7 mil wide, you got to start to go, oh, well, it's getting up to 7 mil wide. Have I got hemistoma? And then you might start checking the records. You might start having a look at the records. The buds of Scribbly Gums are in 11s to 15s. They get right up to the chunky 15 sort of bracket. So they're in 7s to 15s. They're not normally in 7s. They're normally in 11 to 15. So they well and truly put on a heap of bud. Would probably help if I was a bit more concrete on what the recognised differences with the taxa were, but again, rossii was inland, hemistoma was sort of Sydney central a lot of the time. Signata went up the north coast, and sclerophylla got into this western and southwestern part of Sydney, and down into the southern highlands. So, and then there, of course, there was some geographic overlap. But if I keep picking up these fruits, you can just see they just keep remaining on the small side. You got to put a ruler across that, but you know, these guys are 5 mil maximum. They're not getting up to that 7 mil bracket. So I'm comfortable with Sclerophylla racemosa. I can actually see some buds up there, but I'm not going to be able to get them. But they're a nice yellow colour. The buds are they're a nice yellow, and just look for clusters of 11 to 15. I'll just have a final look here, but I can't see any buds there either. But if you get a chance, if you ever get a chance to come into this Upper Nepean State Conservation Area, just note it is prohibited unless you got approval. But if you're doing any ecology in the future, hopefully you can get in here and have a look. It's just a huge patch that the general public are never going to see. So, you know, hopefully it stays that way. And today we'll do everything we can to not make an impact. Alrighty, that's a beautiful Scribbly Gum. Well, one of them anyway. Just a bit of value adding. There's some fresher fruit. I just wanted to show that. You can see the red disc there. That's what you got to look for with Scribbly Gum. That really strong red disc. So that's where we get our sort of hemostoma name from, blood mouth, or blood opening, I guess. It's like the hema in hemoglobin, but this is racemosa, but they've all got that red, racemosa sclerophylla, but they've all got that red disc. Quite nice on the capsules.